you start to question your value. You start to question your self-worth.
Like, the more money you got, the more successful you are, and most people really do buy into that.
But really, I just needed a break.
What I love is helping people.
I'm Julie Bauke, and welcome to The Evolved Career, a podcast where we help you determine what truly does matter most to you and how it can have a profound impact on your life. Today, we welcome Helen Todd, CEO of Sociality Squared, a New York City-based social media agency where they believe, and I love this, Helen, the magic of people coming together around what they value and love. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today.
So, Helen Todd, what do you value and love?
Oh, that's a great question. I love, my family first and foremost. Community, when people come together. I love hosting dinners to get people who normally wouldn't sit beside each other together talking and seeing what magic happens when people get outside of their echo chambers and bubbles and meet people who they might otherwise not do. So,
and it sounds like, you're a connector.
I am definitely a connector.
Of people and dots
yes.
and concepts, it sounds like.
Yes.
So has this always been a part of who you are? When you think back to when you were a child, junior high, high school, college, has that been the central core of Helen Todd?
I think so. I was, in preparing for this interview, I looked back. So much of what we do when we're children shapes our beliefs and who we are as adults and whether we fight that or don't fight that. And I guess two things. Every club that I've ever been a part of, I've become the president. So I know that type A in me.
Now, is that your goal when you go into the club to say, I'm going to be president? Or is it just...
No, it just happens.
Yeah.
But also in bringing people together. I grew up in a very non-diverse town, but somehow I always became friends with the foreign exchange students and was always just curious about any perspective that was outside of the little world that I lived in. And then bringing people together, whether it was through the clubs or just getting out in the community and connecting people.
Yeah, you're an inclusive leader,
Yes.
It sounds like, and you live your life in that way, personally and professionally.
Yeah.
So I had to look up the word sociality. And probably a lot of people do because we hear the word social, socially, society, societal, but sociality was a new word. So I read your description of it on your website, and then I looked it up on everyone's source of brilliance, Wikipedia, and there were a lot of similarities. But there was one sentence in the Wikipedia definition that I thought was really worth noting. But before I share that, what's your definition of sociality?
Yeah, it's just the tendency for people to come together and form communities and diversity of thought and just really just coming together. And that's at the core of social media, community building, the exchange of ideas. So that's really what it means to me. The people coming together. We're inherently social beings, and sociality is at the heart of that and encapsulates that.
So coming together physically. So it could be in a club or an organization.
Yep.
And now that we're living in this entirely different world, people are coming together in different ways.
Yeah, and it's interesting from the social media lens because we can connect digitally with any subculture anywhere on the planet. I mean, you have Jordanian hip-hop artists connecting with hip-hop artists in Brooklyn and Atlanta and all parts of the world. But one thing that we found is, as the pendulum is swinging to all digital and we can live our lives all digital, one thing that we found, and Facebook knows this too, is actually we really do like in person. And we're actually happier when we connect in person with people. So you're seeing yes, these digital worlds and communities are amazing to connect with people that you might not otherwise be able to, geographically locating. But when we come together in person, there's real magic there. And the on and offline worlds are starting to blur even more. And how Facebook is, embracing this and knows it too, is they're reorienting their entire platform around groups and actually encouraging people to meet in person too, which I think is very telling of just the power and importance of in-person connection.
So you see kind of the coming full circle?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that Facebook is launching a dating app.
Yeah. Well, they're sitting on so much data that
That's true.
they probably know better than we do who will be good matches for us.
We probably ought to. We probably ought to take their advice. Some of us probably make better decisions that way.
Yeah.
So here's the sentence in the Wikipedia definition.
Yeah.
Sociality is a survival response to evolutionary pressures. So survival response, which pretty much says we need to connect to survive.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I mean, if I encourage everyone to read Homo Sapiens, that book. I think he outlines the need of how we went from individuals to villages and to cities. Our politics and religions have gotten more complicated to really meet the challenges of societies getting more complicated and larger and what that looks like. But a lot of human behavior today hasn't actually changed that much from those days. I mean, I think there's some statistic like within, I know more stats about Facebook than anything else, that within like Facebook Messenger, you're connecting with your top 5 people on a regular basis, even if you have 200, 500 connections. And that's not too different than how many close connections we've stayed in close contact with for centuries.
Mm-hmm. I saw on your website that you are quite a fangirl of Facebook, and not just the platform, but all artifacts. Facebook. There was a book that you want to tell us about that book?
Yeah, I'm a fangirl of a lot of things. I'm like, as soon as I become a fan, I'm a fan all in.
Okay.
And I go through phases of impulse buying. And I went through a phase early on of impulse purchases around Facebook-related things. It's not quite as sexy these days to be a huge Facebook fan,
right?
Given the current, political climate and whatnot. And I guess as a side rant and comment on that, I do believe in having a healthy perspective. So I'm not a blind Facebook fangirl. But yeah, I was on vacation and I came across a book that had just a really cool portrait, and the style of it was really amazing, of Mark Zuckerberg. And I naturally just had to buy it. And I loved the style so much that I reached out to the artist to see if I could get a print. And then, so yes, I have a print of Mark Zuckerberg at my apartment. But I ended up commissioning the artist to create the artwork for our first website that we launched.
There's connectivity right there, right?
So it was kind of a inspiration comes from anywhere type of moment.
That's right. So tell us about your career. What were those, as you look back, I think you graduated in college about 13 years ago, something like that. As you look back over that period of time, what were those moments, those ahas or those pivot points that you think were the most instrumental in getting you to where you are today?
Yeah. Well, I remember actually in college itself, walking into the marketing department to meet my advisor for the first time. And before I got to his door, and this was here at Xavier University, a Nerf gun, bullet flew out of his office into another office. And it was just like, they couldn't have planned this, but it was such a confirmation, like, oh, these are my people.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm in the right major, this is like something fun. And then just, really fell in love with marketing. And it was during college when Facebook came out for me. And I remember the day that a kid ran up to me as I was going to the Student Activities Council or the government meeting, like, we have to get, all the students on Facebook, then we can have, Xavier or xu.facebook.com. And after that, it really spread like wildfire. So I personally used it right from the very beginning and have always really used, whether it was AIM or Facebook, MySpace a little bit to connect with people. So personally, it was already, that I was part of the shift in Web 2.0. And then, after I went straight from undergrad to grad school, I think at the time, I had this belief that the real world was really scary and I wasn't ready for it.
Are any of us really ready for it?
Well, when I talk to young people, I tell them that they shouldn't be scared. Like, I think that's a false belief. Like, oh, this is your best days in your life. The real world is so scary that like, I don't think that belief actually
Where do you
served
think
me
that comes
that well.
from? Like, why do you think, because I agree with you.
Yeah.
Why do you think kids in that age group are so scared or intimidated of the real world?
We're told we should be. I mean, from like primary school, middle school, you're going to start out as the young person again. High school, you're not going to be prepared for. From high school to college, it's so scary. It's going to be so hard, so much harder than college. And then when you're there, all these adults are saying, these are your golden years, have a ton of fun. The real world is horrible. You got bills.
Don't ever graduate.
Yeah. And then like you're there and then like on the precipice of where everything has, is very clear. You go from one step to another. Mm-hmm. And then, this real world of when a lot of responsibility of career choices, am I going to make the right one? You're on the edge of it. And it's like, it is really scary. And, all these beliefs somehow become like affirming. But I don't think those serve you well because there's so much beyond college that's exciting and amazing, and having disposable income is also one of the very big perks
and not having ramen for every meal
of all of that. Yeah.
It's everything's a step until you get to college, and then it's almost like a free fall. And what I've noticed is when I speak to college students, either in groups or one-on-one, I spoke to a group of young women a few years ago, and they all, young business majors, and they were all sitting there, pen in hand, dressed up, and it was like they were waiting for the one nugget that was going to solve all their problems and give them all the answers, and they were just there to hear it. And I really hate to disappoint you, but there's no such thing. But being afraid to make a mistake and get out there. I mean, I guess I remember back many years ago when I was starting in the workforce, you just were glad to get a job and you just jumped in. And it seems like there's such a range of choices now that it's almost overload. It's a paralysis.
Yeah, and I think my generation specifically, we're the ones that really took, I think, the first load of student loan debt. And we're kind of also seeing like we've done every step that we were told to do to be successful, and we're carrying student debt, and our careers aren't paying us as much as we thought. Am I really happy in a corporate job because that's what I thought I was supposed to do after college? And we're kind of in this like interesting, space of, well, was I actually told, these steps, were those the ones that I wanted to take? And yeah, I think we're in an interesting time, and you're seeing workplaces shift. You're seeing freelance jobs not be part-time, but actual careers. So it's an exciting time where
it is.
But it's also, new territory of if we get to redefine our careers, that's exciting and
it is.
Can be scary at the same time.
But if you're not a risk taker,
yeah.
If you really want that path, you can see where it is quite scary. So your first job out of school?
Yeah, so I went from grad school, and then right after that, got hired by one of the very first, it was probably among the first 6 or so social media agencies.
Okay.
And this was 2009, so it was very in the early days of the world of social media marketing becoming an industry, and loved it. And after 10 months, they fired me.
All righty. Those are character building moments.
Yeah, it was a total blow to my ego as someone who was always an overachiever. I don't think I was totally straight A, but I was, an honor student and whatnot. So yeah, it was a big blow to my ego.
Why did you get fired? Do tell.
Well, it was a small company led by a couple, and, they were growing super fast. The industry was growing super fast. And, I think it was maybe collateral damage in the growth and them not knowing.
Right. Sure.
We'll say, well, that's the nice version.
I think you haven't lived until you've gotten fired. I think that's just one of those human experiences everybody needs to go through.
Yeah.
So you picked yourself up and dust yourself off?
The next morning, I woke up at like 5 a.m. with a domain idea and immediately went to my computer and got it. And, it was something that was funny because I so much value mentors and mentorship and really liked the structure of corporations where there's, a leadership path
Sure,
and whatnot. And the experience was almost like a reversal of like, that was a shit show and they made money. If they can do it, I can make money. And, I jumped into it and I was 26 at the time. So I had no idea what I was doing. A friend jumped in with me. And to me, it was my first thought. Everyone's like, oh, Helen, was that scary? I was like, no. It was like, I had no idea what I was doing. So I was naive, if anything.
Did anybody try to talk you out of it?
People know that they're not going to talk me out of things.
All right. So
if I make up my mind, but I saw it as like, oh, this is like running a club. It's like being president of a club, which it was very natural for me.
Yes.
But somewhere down the line, I don't know if it was taxes that year or, when people really we started growing and working with other people. It's like, oh, other people, are starting to rely on this for paychecks. Oh, there are like actual consequences, like legal consequences and liability and all of this. And at some point, much like 6 months, a year and a half down the line, I was like, this is not like running a club.
But you know what? You needed that mentality to get you started because that was familiar to you.
Yeah.
And so if we can a lot of times just liken or align something that we're doing with something we've done and been successful with in the past, sometimes that can be our jumping off point. And then you've got other stuff to learn on top of that.
Yeah.
But I love that analogy. Yeah.
So, and I'm still learning. I mean, we're almost to our 10 years, and it's always a continuous learning curve, for sure.
Yeah, so that was the domain name that you had the idea for, Sociality?
No, it was, what was it? fbadz.com. I own a lot of domain names.
Yeah.
That one happens to violate the trademark of Facebook.
Okay.
But no, Sociality Squared came along because it was actually, we're like, what domain names are available that are related to social.com. Sociality was taken. We're like, well, exponential, Sociality Squared. That makes sense, So that's, I wish we had a better story, but it was just us and GoDaddy.
Yeah, that in this day and now it would be 1,000 times worse because it's kind of like you think every domain name possible has been taken. Of course, that's not true, but it feels like it.
Oh, but I'm pretty sure we had it was GoDaddy and Googling what these words meant, and we Googled it, and I really actually only heard the word used in conversation really once. It's not like a word that's often used, but it really does encapsulate what we do really well.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So you've been in business 10 years.
Almost 10 years. Yeah, in February will be 10 years.
You've got a team of, it looks like about 12 to 15 people-ish, all over the place.
All over. We're a distributed company. Yeah.
Okay.
And we're a network of freelancers. So I call it my rubber band business model. So depending on our client load and which clients we have and which expertise that we need on the team, we'll build out the account teams based on that and pull together the all-star team for each client.
Mm-hmm. So when you think back over the last 10 years, and obviously things are going well, what do you look at over that 10 years as the low point?
This year has been a rough year.
Okay.
My father passed away in May. Thank you. But prior to that, he'd been in the hospital. And this year has been one of those kind of open eye moments where we really are a small business, and I'm so much a part of the day-to-day that if I'm really torn for family and this and that, this has not been a big growth year for Sociality Squared because, it's because my personal life really took over. But it's also kind of been a year. We relaunched our website, which is really exciting to start rebuilding and laying the foundation for a big comeback. But it's also been very humbling and almost made me look back of like, okay, how can I make sure that everything isn't dependent on me? And what are the systems that we can put in place where Sociality Squared runs whether I'm there or not? So I think that's one of the big goals, moving forward. But
So if you could look back to like when you were 26 and first starting this, and you could go back and sort of get up at 30,000 feet and look at young, naive Helen at 26 starting a business.
Yeah.
What are some of the, as you look back, what are some of the moments in which you said, wow, didn't expect that? Some of the surprises, some of the things, and they don't have to be bad surprises, but what are some of the things that maybe you wish you would have known then that you know now that were, just not expected?
Yeah. I mean, one story outside of work a little bit was when New York can be grueling, especially as a new person there. And it was around the first year or so that I was in New York. I remember being in a black car, and I started off in Queens before I moved to Manhattan. And this gentleman was my driver, and I noticed he was speaking a different language. And as soon as he got off the phone, I love talking to drivers. I mean, you can get a whole pulse on the world in Manhattan just talking to taxi drivers and Uber and Lyft drivers. And I was like, oh, where are you from? And it was, I forget the actual country, but it was Northeast Africa somewhere, a small country. And he's like, oh, I came to the U.S. without, $2 to get a coffee, but his hand motion was more like an espresso. So it was he was speaking French. It was a French country, a colonized country. And we got to talking, and he told me his entire life story. And by the time we got in Manhattan at stoplights, he was like showing me his kids' photos. And he was so proud to have his own car driving in Manhattan. And his next big life goal was to move to Ohio and be a truck driver. And he's like telling me, like, you have to have something to live for. And I'm like in the back seat as, starting my job in New York. I'm like, what am I doing with my life? But
Taxi cab wisdom, right?
Yeah, but he was so clear, like, you have to have something to live for. And that just like sticks out so much. And I think is so much part of the work that you do. So I think I'm always asking that question, of what am I doing and is this fulfilling me and whatnot. But I think, in the practical way, getting a good accountant, I had I had a few like pain points there. I worked with an accountant that wasn't based in New York for the first year or two, and she didn't realize that there was a New York City tax.
Oh no!
So by the time that I worked with another accountant, I owed like 3 years of city back taxes. So that wasn't fun. So yeah, get a good accountant and then really pay attention to contracts. I've gotten into trouble with these auto renewal contracts. And so that was something I wish I had, paid a little bit more attention to. It would have saved me
business owners
a lot of money.
Big thinkers. They love kind of the visualizing, the strategizing, the possibilities. And this other stuff's just details.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm with you because I'm that way as well. And I know I have made so many stupid mistakes when it comes to those kind of things.
Yep.
That, it's just, if it's not your thing, find somebody that it is their thing.
Yes. Don't take it all on yourself. Like,
right.
There are people who have subject matter expertise.
Yeah.
Lean on them for this stuff.
So your clients are small, medium, large companies all over the place?
Mid-size consumer-facing brands. We like to work with purpose-driven brands and brands aligned with our values. So we have, I think the client that exemplifies that the most right now is a social venture in New York. But yeah, we love B Corps and brands that are
B Corps,
just being a source for good through business in the world. So
that's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. So, storytelling. You talk a lot on your website about storytelling. Now, storytelling is it feels overdone.
It does.
It feels like too much of a thing.
Yeah.
And everybody's talking about storytelling, but my guess is you guys have been talking about it long before everybody else was talking about it.
I mean, storytelling goes back to cave times and have evolved. So I don't know if we're like on the early days of storytelling.
Okay.
It does feel like it's much more of a buzzword these days than before. But yeah, I mean, everything comes down to story. It's how we connect and relate to one another and how we process information, whether that's, in an entertaining or educational way. Like, story connects us. So yeah, we think a lot about story. And from a social media standpoint, it's like you have the big picture story of the brand purpose and brand story, and then you break it down into campaigns or bringing the brand alive in many different ways. And each of the little pieces of content has to stand alone as its own story, but be part of this bigger story and support that. And then we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can bring these stories alive in the different platforms. I mean, there's so many different tools and forms of expression that all these platforms offer. Like, no creator thought in vertical 8-second stories, a few years ago, but now that's a huge platform, and we're literally thinking in, this would be great for the vertical format stories. So we're reimagining, what stories are and how to express them in all the different tools and fun ways that we have to do that today.
What's your favorite story that you have that relates to your business? A Sociality Squared story. And it could be from one of the clients you worked with, or when you really think about an impactful story, you're like, yes, this nails it. Is there anything you can share?
One that comes to mind offhand is through Like a Camera, which we helped launch them on to social media and worked with them for 5.5 years. We got to do a lot of really amazing things. And part of the scope of work that we did was interviewing photographers and capturing their story for videos and then blog posts and, packaging it out in a lot of different ways. And I got to meet Nick Oot, and he is the photographer who captured the Napalm Girl. And
wow,
that one image helped end the Vietnam War. And it was so amazing getting to meet him. And we actually got to see the original negative. It's boxed up in a climate-controlled room. And in real life, it was a single negative is this, just a few centimeters big and, an inch long. And just to see that in person and know how one image can change the world or impact the world, that was a really just humbling and amazing story to tell, but also just reinforce like the power of images. And just one image can tell an entire story that can change the world. So we've got to, share a lot of amazing stories through our clients. And that one is one that kind of stands out as
great. Wow. Thanks
a favorite.
For sharing. Yeah. So if you were standing in front of a group of 22-year-olds and they said, Helen, I want my work life to matter. What advice do you have? What would you say?
That's a great question. I've been talking about that actually a lot at a conference this week. I think it comes down to first really asking yourself, what is it that you value and that gets you excited, and starting from a foundational level of what matters to you. And not everyone knows right offhand what that is. I actually spoke about this at South by Southwest many years ago, but it's like what you love to do, what you're good at, and then what the market will pay for. It's kind of like a Venn diagram. And in the center of that, it's like, maybe start there, because we've got bills to pay and everyone needs to make money at the end of the day. I would say be introspective. In preparation of this interview, I was thinking about other pivotal moments. And another one was like year 7. I feel like this marital terminology, like
7-year itch.
Yeah, you get the 7-year itch. I was having that with my company. It's like the biggest relationship I've ever had is the relationship with my company, And at 7 years, I'm like, is sociality squared really making me happy? Is this what I want to do?
It's getting on my nerves. It's leaving the toilet seat up.
Do I want to break up with sociality squared? And I went to a women's retreat, and it was wonderful. And it really just, I'm a big believer in retreats and vacations and, resetting, and for that reason. But one of the exercises they had us do was to write our own eulogies. And it gave such an interesting perspective of, what do I want my legacy to be? What is important to me now? And then how can I match, what I do with my career to this vision of myself? And I rewrite it, not that often, but when I'm having these questions, I'm like, well, let me write my eulogy now and see where I'm at right now and what's important to me that way. So I think that's it's a kind of a weird tactic to use. It sounds weird.
No, it isn't at all.
But I find it very powerful to get you thinking outside of, what I want to do in the next 6 months, or out of fear of like, oh, I need a job. Let me just grab that, or, or being overwhelmed by what does matter and 20 million choices in front of me.
Well, I think that's great. And the nugget in there I want to make sure that our listeners don't miss is that your answer to that question will change and grow as you change and grow. Mm-hmm. And so if you're 22 and you don't know what matters to you, or you don't know, it's okay. Just get out there and try something that feels mostly right and pivot from there, and just keep pivoting and getting closer to it. But don't be afraid to ask yourself those hard questions. And so with that, I'm going to ask you, are you ready to play 2 questions, one deep and one shallow?
Sure. And I will say, I love the name of this podcast and your work for that exact reason. We do evolve as people, as in our careers. So that resonated with me right away. So.
Yeah, and I think we forget that I'm not the same as I was 10 years ago, and I hope I'm different in 10 years.
Yeah.
And so to think that my interests and values and priorities will be the same, it's foolish. But no one ever taught us how to have that conversation with ourselves.
Yeah.
We're not really good at guiding ourselves through that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
All right. I think we'll do the shallow one first. What fictional character do you wish you could meet?
Fictional character. Ooh, well, Superman comes to mind first. I've always, that's another fangirl thing of Superman. Yeah. I don't know if that's the best answer, but that's the one that popped into my head first. All right, well, good.
You should always go with your first answer, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and our final question. What breaks your heart?
I think it's when we dehumanize people, and commoditize people, and whether that's treating them as just a data point to optimize and engage, or, retarget our ads to, and not as a person, and just, not acknowledging the humanity in other people. So,
and because it's my show, I can do anything I want. I'm going to ask you one more.
Go for it.
To close, what does it mean to you to have a good life?
I think it's just being happy, and looking back at some of the moments where I've just felt joy and happiness. One that stands out with just being in a room full of friends, and a few of my friends were on the couch. I think a few of us were just laying on the floor. And this one moment with a group of my friends a couple of years ago, we were just laughing. I was laughing on the floor. And that's one of those touchstone moments for me of when was I really happy? Laughing on the floor with friends where they'll love me no matter what.
Exactly.
I want more of those moments in my life.
Fantastic. Helen, how can we find out more about you and Sociality Squared?
Thank you for asking. I love that question. Visit our brand new website, socialitysquared.com.
Spell sociality for us, because it is an unusual word.
I know. I tried to buy s2.com to make it easier. It's social, ITY, squared. So that's the easiest way. And then you can find all of our, social links on that. And then I'm at Helen's Travels on Instagram and Twitter. And then Helen Todd on LinkedIn. And
your website is very instructive in terms of what you do, who you work with. So if anybody fits that category of ideal client for you, and you like what you heard today, definitely check out their website and give Helen and her team a call. And thank you so much for your time today. I think I love having people of different generations on, because sometimes we think the wisdom comes from, when you're sitting on a rocking chair on the porch and you're passing down your nuggets to the kids, sitting at your feet. We all know that isn't how it works. We gather wisdom at each step along the way in our careers, and it's learning about the world, but it's also learning about ourselves. And where the real impact comes and the power comes is when we act on that information in order to increase our impact in our worlds. And what a world it would be if we all did a little bit more of that. Yeah. So thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
If you enjoyed meeting the Evolved Careerist on today's episode, well, we've got a lot more lined up for you. Subscribe, tell your friends, rate us and write a review. And of course, follow us on social media. But if you're interested in learning more about how you can evolve your career, you can contact us through theevolvedcareer.com or thebaukegroup.com, and that's Bauke. Do you know somebody who'd be a great guest, who has a great career story to tell? Or do you think you qualify? Then email me. My email address is in the podcast description. Until next time, here's to your career happiness.